Everyone, thank you for joining me to this session about due diligence. My name is Martin Dubbey, and my company Harod Associates are a due diligence provider across many jurisdictions, and in particular we undertake due diligence for government bodies, and I'm here today to just sort of unpack some of the do's and don'ts about what you should be doing when you're making an application to for citizenship or residency, and you have to go through the due diligence process. So effectively what I'm going to do is give you a day in the life of a due diligence provider, what we're looking for, and as I said, what the do's and don'ts are. But before we do that, let me just introduce myself in a bit more detail. My career has spanned many years, 30 years with UK government service, predominantly as an investigator. For several years, I was the head of cocaine intelligence, which is quite a title, for the customs service in the UK, and then switched out to the serious organised crime agency, where I undertook a similar role for several years. And then I left government employment and I moved into the private sector as Harod, and we provide investigation and due diligence services around the globe. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about this morning. Harod Associates itself is made up of former government investigators like myself, and we have access to the latest cutting-edge technology that enables us to undertake due diligence work quicker and faster, and most importantly helps us to dig deeper than humans can quite often around what is out there on the internet, what is out there on various closed data sets, and what is out there on social media. So that will all come into play when we do our due diligence work. I'm going to switch now to PowerPoint presentation and just share the screens with you. And as I say, the subject of my presentation today is the importance of due diligence. Some of the do's and don'ts at the due diligence stage. Whether you're listening to this program and you're an applicant, or whether you're an agent, and whether you are interested in the whole process, due diligence now is an extremely important part of the process that you will have to undertake, either yourself or on behalf of a client. And so I can help explain some of that. We've worked extensively around the world, so you'll be seeing shortly that we have a lot of combined experiences and a lot of knowledge of various cases. So what I plan to do today is talk you through some of the things we're looking for. I'll talk you through some case examples, some that have gone not so well, and we'll explain some of the things we're on the lookout for. Let me explain at this stage. We're not here to catch people out. What we're here to do is help facilitate good applicants through the process so that they can quickly make that application for citizenship or residency. What we're also here to do is perhaps weed out those that might see this as an opportunity for nefarious activities, to launder money, to hide their identity, to hide their location. I should stress they form very much a very small percentage of the people we look at, but nonetheless, if they sneak through the system, can cause untold damage to the reputation of the country that you're applying for. Let's talk a bit more about that. Why do we do due diligence on applicants? Surely it's just better to accept everybody. Well, we know that due diligence, and I'll be candid here, is a costly and it's a time-consuming process. However, it's also a vitally important process, part of the process. The authorities have to be satisfied with the bona fide of applicants. That may seem fairly obvious. If you're giving them something as important as a state passport, you have to make sure that the applicant is of good reputation, that there's no skeletons in the cupboard, nothing that will embarrass the country that you are applying for. And I'm afraid to say, over the years, there have been some examples of that where applicants have not been picked up that should have been refused passports on the basis they could ultimately, maybe months or years later, cause that embarrassment. And there's nothing a newspaper likes more than to jump on the bandwagon and say, hey, look at this country, can you believe that they gave a passport to this fraudster? Well, that's exactly the sort of person that we're here to try and weed out. But of course, what the papers aren't so keen to weed out is the fact that this is a fantastic investment opportunity, that this is of great benefit to the country. And, we want to make sure that good applicants, genuine applicants, can get through the process quickly and thoroughly and easily. We talk about rooting out the bad applicants. We don't want the money launderers. We don't want the fraudsters. We want the genuine applicant who's got money to invest to get through the process. And if we can do that, if we can help facilitate that by conducting the due diligence in a timely fashion as well, obviously that's our aim. Now, you can help us in that aim, and we'll be going through the do's and don'ts. But when I say you can help us, it's clearly important. You must follow the instructions that you're given about how to make your application and how you submit your documentation. I'm sure there are many agents out there that will be groaning at the weight of the paperwork, but you understand this is a necessary part of being given that all-important state document, your passport, your citizenship of another country. I've really touched on this. Due diligence is important. It's an insurance against future problems. The extent of due diligence has really improved over the past few years. I would say that, of course, I'm a due diligence provider. What we want to make sure is that should someone slip through the net or should someone be queried, we can absolutely justify to whoever's asking that they were fully vetted at the time. And many of you will know that the USA and the EU look very closely at citizenship programs, and they are looking with the concern that the fraudster or the money launderer slips through the net. Well, our job is to root those people out and make sure that their application is duly noted when it goes up for consideration. It's really important that we're able to show, or the country is able to show, the US and the EU, that a full audit of that applicant has taken place before they were given citizenship. Often our reports run to 40, 50 pages of a single applicant in terms of the detail that we go into. So I'm going to explain a bit more about that. But before I do so, I just want to sort of highlight now the sort of range of citizenship applications that we're now dealing with. Across the world now, this is really a multicultural, a diverse, and worldwide program. And you can see that applicants that we've been dealing with in the past few months, it's a snapshot this year, or sorry, the past 12 months, clearly show the range of countries where we have to have knowledge of, we have to have our partners who are able to leverage local inquiries and to undertake the necessary due diligence in those respective countries. All the time, investigators working for Harod are monitoring applicants to look for any issues that might cause us to be concerned, might cause us to raise a red flag in relationship to the application. One of the things I'm going to emphasize throughout all this is that, with your application, please be transparent. Please tell us the full truth, because, if you miss something out, it could be wrongly interpreted that you've got something to hide. And it's therefore best to fully answer all the questions that you get asked and do that in a timely manner so that it doesn't delay the due diligence and it doesn't cause any hiccups to the due diligence system. Moving on now, what are we looking for? You know, what would concern a country? And I have a couple of examples here of slightly different criteria from two different countries, whereby they would be concerned if, for example, we have to flag red a particular issue. So you can see on the left-hand side, does the applicant provide false information on his or her application? Clearly, if you do, or you don't make full disclosure, you're going to be headed for a red flag. Has the person been convicted in any country of an offence for which the maximum custodial penalty in this country is in excess of 6 months imprisonment? Again, the citizenship programme should not be seen as a programme for convicted criminals to get away from their past. This is not the sort of genuine applicant that countries will want to see applying to them. Is the person subject of a criminal investigation? Again, this might be something that at the time a applicant does not have a criminal conviction, but might be under government investigation, something that if they were given a citizenship by another country would cause great embarrassment. If they've been involved in a fraud scheme or something like that, then obviously to give them a passport to another country is going to be extremely embarrassing. So of course we have to keep an eye out for that. Is considered to be a national security risk to the country that you're applying for or to any other country. Well, examples of that might be that if you're perceived to be working for a foreign power in a position of influence or in a position in the defence industry, where again, it's not that you're under investigation, but certainly you could cause embarrassment to the country of application, and you could be deemed a national security risk because of what you know. It might be perceived that you're applying for a passport for spying purposes, etc. And that is why it's really important that we establish your full antecedents. Is involved in any activity likely to cause disrepute to a country? Well, that speaks for itself, doesn't it? You know, again, an applicant to any country, that country is going to be expecting you to be upstanding. It's going to expect, if you're an agent, it's going to expect your applicants to be upstanding citizens and role models of the country that you're currently in. If you're out and perhaps causing disrepute, I'm sure you can think of some examples, then again, that would potentially be a red flag. None of these necessarily bar you from your citizenship application, but certainly it's something that would be considered and would fulfill the criteria under which you could be barred. Finally, the entry there has been denied a visa to a country with which this particular country has visa-free travel. So it can't be perceived to be a way around the regulations. So typically, if this country has visa-free travel to, say, for example, a country like the USA, yet you've been refused a visa for direct application, that will be a problem, because the USA would perceive that you are trying to get around the issue. So let's look at the criteria on the right-hand side for the second country. You'll see that it's very similar. First question, has provided information which is false. So again, this is the top criteria, and probably 95% of red flags of applicants fall into these criteria, that they have provided information that's false or haven't declared information that they should have done. Next point, has a criminal record other than in respect of a minor offence. If you have minor traffic offences, minor civil court, etc., that should not necessarily be a bar to your application. We're talking about significant criminal offences. The first country was 6 months imprisonment. That's probably a good measure of what we'd be looking for. Is a potential security risk. So again, you see the similarity in criteria. Is involved in any activity likely to be cause disrepute to the country. And finally, has been denied a visa to a country with which this country has visa-free travel. So you can see that quite often the criteria, whichever country you're applying for, it's very similar criteria that we will be judging you against as to whether you're going to, or how you're going to be assessed in your due diligence application. I'm going to move on now to more specific documentation that you're asked to supply and that we're asked to verify. And this is how we assess it. So we will be looking to provide our clients, the government clients, with an assessment of your due diligence application, or with an assessment of your application via the due diligence process of what risk you present to that country. You can see on the left-hand side that the register of the particular applicant that we're talking about is quite high, 48 they've been scored. So we'd say to the country that this was done for, you might want to consider very seriously this application, whether or not you give them citizenship. There are obviously clearly a number of factors that give cause for concern and probably hit the criteria against which you against the criteria at which you could be rejected. So on the right-hand side is our risk matrix. One of the issues is your current country of residence. You'll appreciate that some countries are under quite severe sanctions at the moment, and so therefore, whilst that's not the individual's fault, that's an issue for the country, the fact that you come from that country does affect your scoring in terms of your application. The next point is verification of your documents. This might seem like a real pain to be supplying all these documents, but obviously we've got to be absolutely satisfied of your bona fide. If you're an agent listening, then again, we'd say to agents, absolutely make sure of the bona fide and antecedents of your applicants. If you don't, it only delays the process whereby which they get caught out, red flagged, and their application rejected. And therefore, you want to be sure that this is an application that's most likely going to go through. It may even be worth considering your own due diligence at this early stage. So what are we looking for? ID verification, marriage status verification, passports, and education. Those are clearly important pieces of antecedent information whereby we can evaluate whether or not you're a genuine applicant. Verification of address. I'm going to jump ahead here in my list of do's and don'ts. What I'm going to say here, this is really important. If you have just recently moved house, then let us know. Make it clear in your application that you have just moved, because we will check on that address, and if you're not there or not present, or you've only just arrived and there's no history of you having been there, then that could be an item of concern where it gets scored higher on this risk matrix than the 0 we've given this particular applicant. Now you can see in the next section we talk about business affiliation and employment, undeclared business entities, and revoked or struck off businesses. In the case of this applicant, we have clearly found issues of concern around his business, his or her business, and that's why it's scored highly. The next section, source of wealth, availability of investment, verification of salary and income. Look, this is really the bottom line now. Can you afford to make the investment that you're being asked to make? Do you have the money available to you as a result of genuine business or genuine reasons, such as an inheritance or something like that? Or have you perhaps got it from nefarious means? The more evidence to prove that you have your money from a genuine source of wealth, the better and the quicker your application will go. We know it's a nuisance getting bank statements from your bank and various financial documents, but as I say, this helps speed the application through the process. The next stage is bankruptcy records. Well, in this case, there was no bankruptcy or criminal records found. in the country of the applicant. You will, of course, be asked for a police certificate to confirm this, but we also double check to make sure the document is genuine. And that does remind me of another point, which we'll pick up later. Do make sure your documents are genuine. We will establish fake documents, borrowed documents, etc. It's not worth it. You will be caught out if you fake your documentation. Any litigation records, or clearly in this case, none have been found, so it's been marked low risk, and clearly the person is not under sanctions or PEP, and so therefore that's as an individual as opposed to their country. If you remember what I said at the beginning of this risk matrix, that's clearly marked low on that. Now, what we found with this applicant, and we talk about high risk issues raised, what we're unable to do is verify the applicant's salary. We found that they've actually got citizenship currently of 2 different countries, and in those particular countries, it's a technical illegality. And so therefore, we've weighted the risk matrix by providing a high risk reputational score. So you can see from the green boxes that we score you on the basis of your application, and really the red boxes are a score based on the risk you present, because either you haven't told us something or we found out something about you that raises a concern with the that would raise a concern with the country of application. And in this particular case, this person veers towards the higher level of scoring. So what else are we looking for? Let me give you a case example. This is perhaps an example of where our due diligence process will catch people out. In this particular case, subjects 1 and 2, subject 1 had an undeclared company entity that we were to find, a registered address, but no trading address. The company 2, where subject 1 and subject 2 were both shareholders and managers. And then declared annual salary, which wasn't evidenced in either case, then you can see that quite significant amounts of salary, and certainly would be considered enough to support a citizenship application in most countries, certainly of substantial size. But don't forget, if you're going to declare a salary of that size, you've got to be able to prove it. We want to see substance, wage slips, bank statements to prove that indeed you do collect a salary of this scale. Both subjects, interestingly, had invalid Malaysian visas. So what does that mean? What we actually found out was this was a ring of 3 people who had made applications whereby they'd shared corporate details amongst themselves and in fact claimed to be the main boss of the same company. They had taken the same details and each used it in their own application. Fortunately, in this case, we received 2 of the applications to vet, and so we immediately found that. What we were then able to do is highlight to the country involved that there was clearly some kind of scam going on, something of interest, and we identified the fact that a 3rd person had made an application using exactly the same company details and corporate interests. And this is where the question of fake documentation comes in, that it's manipulated to show that it was genuine, or to try and show that it was genuine for each applicant. So it's the sort of thing we're out on the lookout for, and it's the sort of thing that won't get past us. So don't be tempted to do that. If you were to guess the business here, this was an upstreet, allegedly the address of an upmarket barber shop where the annual income was $300,000 per annum. We're not convinced about that, and in fact the remainder of their documentation, bank statements, did not stand this up either. But don't forget, we're often physically checking on the addresses that you give us to make sure that what you do tell us about the addresses is genuine and that you are where you say you are. Okay, so there's some genuine due diligence rules here about what we should do in a due diligence situation. Firstly, no one applicant is the same. Well, clearly, none of us are the same. And very few are 100% clear of risks or issues related to the application. The point being here is that, don't worry about it, be genuine in your application. I'm sure most of you will get through. Be transparent. It's best to fully disclose your information rather than have information discovered about you through the due diligence process. If you do have something that you think would be of concern, then it's worth mentioning it and flagging it up in the application. That's far better than having the due diligence process find out something about your background that you wouldn't necessarily want to have found out. Perhaps I can give you the classic case of an applicant whose name was the same as a very well-known sanctioned person, and that applicant was rejected from a number of countries from applying. But actually, it was just complete coincidence of the family name. There was no actual family connection. So therefore, what I would advise in those circumstances is attach a note and explain the circumstances, explain your family tree so that it can be fully verified and establish that indeed that's correct, you're not linked in any way to the sanctioned person. If by no fault of yours you happen to have the same name as a sanctioned person, well, clearly we need to do some extra checks to make sure you're not connected, but that is something that can be easily resolved. Read the questions carefully and answer them fully. I've noticed that some people perhaps are in a rush and they speed through the questions. Maybe your agent's doing the form for you, it's on the telephone line and perhaps the signal's not great, but don't be tempted to rush the application. Don't cut corners or leave information out. Again, this will delay your application. I think once you've made the decision to go for it, put 100% effort into preparing the application so that maximum information is there for the due diligence provider. We're normally given 30 days to process, 30 working days to process your application. Now, we could do it quicker than that if you make a full declaration and make it easy for us. Fully declare your business affiliations. There will be criteria under which you don't have to declare all your business interest. For example, quite often a country will say, well, if you're only a minor shareholder, we're not really interested. But I think to be on the safe side, my advice would be declare them all. The reason I'd say declare them all, what if the company that you have a small shareholding in is a subject of sanctions in some way? If you haven't declared it, then it looks suspicious. Not end of the world, it just looks suspicious. You might want to consider whether or not you should put your full shareholding information down. So let's move on to do's of the system. Do. Agents, if you're an agent listening, do check applications you're preparing on behalf of applicants. Ultimately, it's your responsibility to make sure the application goes through smoothly. So if you missed anything out, then it's important that you've checked it and you've made sure there's nothing missing. Question the applicant along the lines of I've been questioning. Have you made full business declarations? Have you declared everything? If the applicant says to you, well, I have a minor shareholding here, you might want to advise them, well, put it down anyway, just to be on the safe side. Be transparent and tell the truth. I know this can be quite might feel a personal invasion type situation, but really it's in your best interest to speed the application through and ultimately get you what you want, which is citizenship of another country. already talked about being open about your business interest. Make sure that you're very clear about what you do, and don't forget your offshore business interests. They're equally liable. There's nothing wrong with having offshore facilities providing there for legitimate purposes, but if you don't declare them and we find them, then it just looks suspicious and may raise a red flag. I mentioned this earlier, be clear if you've moved or you're moving. The point about that is we do send people out to check on your addresses, and if you're not known or you've moved away, then it can be suspicious. Don't forget, sometimes applications do get caught up and have considered some delay from when you submit it. Maybe the agent delays it or whatever. So if you move in the meantime, it's important to keep your agent up to date. If you have a problem, mention it. We did talk about that earlier. If you have a problem, it's really important. Just spell it out and put it in your application. Be clear about your accounts and sources of income. That's really important. It helps us assess your source of wealth, and it helps us understand if you have sufficient means by which you can make the submission for citizenship. Provide wage slips in addition to bank statements. This is all helpful background information. It adds to the credibility of your application. I'm going to conclude again. I keep saying this, but if there's a problem with your application that you're aware of, be honest and declare it. You might have had a previous criminal conviction, for example. Don't hide it, declare it, and hopefully it may be considered spent. It may be long enough in the past that it's not relevant to the country that you're applying to. But the important thing is to be honest about it. Now we're going to move on to the don'ts. And here they are. Here are the don'ts. Don't cut corners. It's not worth it. It delays your application. Often we send applications back purely because there's not enough clarity. And if you can imagine the process of coming from the country you're applying to the due diligence provider, back to the country, back to your agent, back to you, in some cases you could be talking quite a considerable delay. So it's not worth cutting corners. This may seem really obvious, but please don't use fake documents or signatories. We do specifically check on signatories. If you have an authorized signatory, we do check. And we're particularly on the lookout for what may be fake documents. We have some great technology that helps us tell if documents fake or genuine. And so, as I say, really important that you make sure you use genuine documents. Don't borrow documents either. If it's not yours, don't borrow it to make yourself look good. Again, that is effectively a fake declaration, and that's the sort of thing you remember is top criteria for a red flag, providing false information. If it's not yours, don't snowpake it and put something over the top. It is something that we will find out. Don't exaggerate. You may feel tempted to exaggerate your annual income to show that you are a credible financial applicant. Again, not worth it. You'll be asked to provide proof of that, and if you can't prove it, then again, it might be deemed that you've been providing false information in your application. Hiding your source of wealth is a problem we probably helps generate something like 80% of our red flags, where the wealth may be there, but it's not justified. It's not proved to us that it's come from a genuine source, or that we have concerns over the source of wealth. If you've created your wealth from source, and I'm sure no one watching this program will be in that situation, if you've created your wealth from fraud or money laundering or something like that, then you would not be welcome in the country that you're applying for. So therefore, make sure these are genuine applications. Do not hide your source of wealth. Because at the end of the day, if you do, then the assumption or inference might be that it's suspicious in some way. Here's a really important point. Don't borrow money to inflate your income or your holdings. One, you may find yourself in debt with crippling interest payments. But two, it's something we're on the lookout for, that it's not genuinely your money, your income, and so therefore a reason for rejection. Don't supply historic statements. We really need to see up-to-date statements of your current position. Seeing statements from 3 years ago might be interesting, but really may not reflect your current holdings and income. So provide up-to-date statements. And don't miss any pages from your application. Don't ignore questions. These are really important points that, again, have resulted in failed applications in the past, or certainly delayed applications. And this is where I come back to my original point, that if you're an agent, please do check these do's and don'ts with your applicant, so that when your submission goes forward, you've got it as complete as you can. There's nothing worse, I'm sure everyone will agree, than in having an application either rejected or delayed because of a silly administration error. So just double check those applications before they go in. So I hope that's been useful. That is effectively a day in the life, if you like, of a due diligence provider. It's something that we're providing day in, day out. So we've got a lot of experience around how to do this. And we've learned from our former government service a lot of lessons about how people might try and get around these sort of regulations, etc. So we are enjoined to root out, as I say, bad applications. But certainly the vast majority we want to facilitate. We want you to help achieve the citizenship or the residency in the country you're applying for. So don't be put off by the process. If you answer everything genuinely, transparently, and provide all the documentation, you'll find it's pretty painless. So good luck, and perhaps at this point, can I take any questions? Thank you.